better life.
Hey, it is the voice of Indiana County. It's WCCS 101.1 FM, AM 1160, and WCCSradio.com on a gorgeous Friday morning. But you might notice a change or two in the weather that is coming with the coming of fall, which begins tomorrow morning at 2:50 a.m. Mr. Bob Pollock with us this morning from the Extension Service. Our conversation brought to you by Marcus & Mack, voted best personal injury law firm in the Best of Indiana County contest. Marcus & Mack, a law firm representing injured people. So it officially becomes fall, and that officially becomes, for a lot of people, the season when you start to button things up on the growing season and prepare for not only the winter, but for next spring as well.
True.
People will start thinking now about fertilizing and doing all of those things to prepare their lawns for next year. Because we always get to spring and we get calls from people who say, when should I do this? And you tell them that would have been 3 months ago. and so let's give a little.
You're either late or you're ahead of schedule.
Yeah, a primer, if you will, on what we should be thinking about this fall. I don't know if you can actually say that there's a schedule. This week you should be doing this, next week you should be doing that, and the week after this. But as a general rule, there are things that we should start to be thinking about doing right about now. Right?
There sure are. There's lots of things we can do in late summer and especially early fall. Mm-hmm. We can plant a lot of things in the fall, especially trees and shrubs. We can move things, perennials, especially that have pretty much died back at this point. Mm-hmm. Bulbs, those, if those have gotten too thick or too dense or aren't doing as well as they used to, now's a good time to dig those up, sort them out, keep the biggest, best ones, and then replant those so they're spread out a little bit, or even make, additional spots in the garden to have those bursts of color, which, of course, a lot of those are in the spring. But, of course, there are other bulbs that will, bloom in the summer and even late summer. So it's a good time to be looking at the garden and doing that, taking care of weeds. There might be some weeds that have gotten out of hand. If you haven't been looking around, they can kind of snake up and grow in between plants and be kind of camouflaged until you really look close, and then, wow, how did I miss that? And some of those are annuals, and some of those are perennial weeds that can sneak in there. But kind of working on those while they're smaller, when they're younger, before they get too big, are all good things to do, because those perennials, that root system, the top may die back on that weed, but the root system will be there to come up next spring. So getting in there and working on those, not letting them get ahead of you, because oftentimes, those not only will they spread by the root system, but they'll also, when they flower and set seed, and then that makes it even more challenging to get rid of.
Are there things I should be looking at and saying, as soon as the first killer frost comes along, that's when I should be doing this?
Yeah, and some, and that's kind of a signal for a lot of plants. They will really start to go dormant, especially those perennials and things, and that's kind of you can wait till that happens and then start to look at dividing those and moving those around.
Okay.
And of course, then we start to get into the fall colors from plants, and so that's just a nice time to be out and be observing things as well during that time frame. But because of the cooler days, we have shorter days, cooler days. We usually have ample moisture in the fall, and those are the reasons that it can be good to plant. There are a lot of plants that we can be planting in the fall. Mm-hmm. So if we need to replace some shrubbery or things, or even add those materials to the landscape, fall, this late summer, early fall can be a good time to do that, because then we can get them planted. They still have time. The soil's warm enough that they'll get established yet this fall.
Does that become also the time to maybe do some repair on your lawn?
Sure. Yeah, definitely. We can get another, depending on how much fertilizer you've applied this year, now can be a window to get an application on, and then you'll finish up with one in October, early November for that fall fertilization. Kind of that winterizer fertilizer is typically what they call that. It usually has a little less nitrogen. Mix? Yeah, usually that winterizer fertilizer has less nitrogen in it, and it may also have a little bit of iron and maybe a little bit of potassium in there. So on that fertilizer label, we have nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium are the three numbers that are on there. Now, if you add iron, that would be a fourth number that would be on the bag.
So you'll see a number like a 1055 or something like that.
Yeah. And typically our turf fertilizers are high in nitrogen, so they'll be 25 to 35% roughly nitrogen, and then usually there's 0 phosphorus and 0 potassium in those. But that winterizer is a little bit different. They'll back off the nitrogen because we don't need as much growth. But that's a time when that plant will help repair its root system and bulk itself up, to repair itself and go through the winter. But we don't need to push as much growth, at that time of year. So they'll back off in that, and then maybe add a little bit of potassium and maybe a little bit of iron in there.
So it's not as much about growth over on top of the ground; it's what's underneath the ground.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Kind of building, repairing that root system.
The soil in the garden itself. What should I be doing with that in the fall?
We can look at that if we need. That's a time frame to do a soil test. After the growing season. So we've grown a lot of plants. A lot of those we've harvested those plants, and so that takes away nutrients. So we want to look at if we're not tilling some of that plant material back into the ground, then and we're removing all that stuff, then we're removing nutrients. So it's a good time to do a soil test, see where our soil pH is. We don't just want to assume that we need to lime it. We might need to do that, and we might not, but soil test will indicate where our pH is, whether we need to apply lime, and how much. And then if we're deficient on any other nutrients, phosphorus, potassium, calcium, magnesium, then that can be a time to, in the fall, as we're cleaning everything up and prepping it for next year, then that's the time to do that. Also, if we're looking to move our garden, now's the time to be preparing for next year, getting that new plot ready to go.
So plowing up the grass and
so we could start that process, especially if we've got some perennial weeds and things in there, roughly tilling it. So spading it, if we're doing it by hand, or if we're plowing does have advantages at times. We used to automatically, that was what we did. And now we don't do that so much. But just kind of rough, when we plow, it just turns that volume of soil kind of over on its side. It kind of almost flips it over. But it kind of leaves it intact, too. So if there's roots and things in there, that helps hold that soil together, and we kind of flip that. Enough that any turf and things on top will kind of be buried a little bit, so that'll allow those to decay and rot. It'll also expose those roots to be, desiccated and hopefully die, but then also add some organic matter to that soil. So if we can roughly spade that new area, we don't want to fine till it. We can rough till it to leave some chunks and things, because over winter, just nature, freeze thaw cycles, it'll break it down for us. So that's a good thing to do. And we can do that especially if we're okay and we're not going to get soil erosion. If we have turf on the whole outside of that new bed area, where it's not too sloped, because we don't want to lose soil. We don't want to have that run off and move off site over the winter. But and if we've have some problems with our garden too, tilling it in the fall kind of exposes some of that stuff. It allows it to decay. and more decay to occur, and kind of that composting process a little bit to happen, over the winter, and that naturally breaking things up a bit too.
All right. So there's a whole bunch of things that we can be doing right now to get our gardens and yards and shrubs and everything else in shape for next year. Thank you, sir. We'll
You're welcome.
probably have this topic again.
Yeah,
as
there's still
progresses.
other more to do.
More to do. Shoo, I'm tired already. It is the voice of Indiana County. It's WCCS 101.1 FM, AM 1160, and WCCSradio.com. And Fox News next, and then Josh in the newsroom.